Okay, we're here at the Erislandy Lara Brian Castaño post-fight, so we'll start with the main event. So I know it's always hard to score from when you're shooting, but how did it feel like it went for you? What was your feel on the outcome?
And again, apologize for the cop-out. I always say this in every video, but yeah, it is hard to score while shooting, but I generally do get a sense of who I feel is winning just from who I see landing more and who's A-side, B-side, and all those things. But I felt that Lara was up, that it was close, but I thought Lara had a comfortable lead as long as he didn't give away like the 11th and 12th. Generally, he tends to kind of put his foot on the gas a tiny bit because he's cruising normally at that point. So I thought Lara was up. The decision was a complete surprise to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I scored at 7-5 Lara, but I could have seen it for sure going to Castaño. I was so impressed with Castaño tonight. I mean, I was looking forward to this fight coming in. I think it definitely lived up to expectations, probably exceeded expectations. I think it will be interesting to see how people judge this after the fact, especially getting a chance, to see it on TV or rewatch it. Castaño really impressed me on the inside. I mean, I have watched Lara Canelo a few times, and I've scored that fight for Lara. I felt like Canelo got too much credit for aggression that was not always effective. And Castaño, I mean, I was not ringside for Lara Canelo, but I was ringside here, and he really, I mean, I was impressed. Lots of shots on the inside where people might think from a distance, so that was just mauling stuff. Like, he would land really, really clean shots. I mean, Lara does not always give you the biggest opportunity, but Castaño frequently really made the most of it. I mean, he, with only a few inches on the inside, was turning over his shots, landing really hard body shots, landing shots to the head. I really liked seeing him in person. I mean, I had been impressed with him before from his Michelle Soro fight, from his World Series of Boxing performances. This was his, I believe, his 16th fight. I mean, I can't wait to see. I hope he continues to stay in the mix of 154. I really can't wait to see more of him. I mean, what do you think about his future? Other guys in the division? Do you think he has room to grow?
Yeah, definitely. I honestly was expecting him, because you see these type of fights, just like, okay, here's going to be a Lara get-back fight. We'll put him in here with a, younger, basically kind of like a prospect, even though I know he has that extensive amateur background. But essentially, professionally, has less experience. And, the narrative's supposed to be like, oh, Lara looks good and then gets back in the title picture. That totally upset the apple cart with this guy. Generally, as we were talking off air or off camera, I was thinking you need like a Trout, a Saddam Ali, or something like that to step up. Your fighter.
Saddam
you don't.
Ali,
you don't just jump him straight to.
Right.
So
it seemed like such a big leap. He seemed to be in the role of the sasacrificial lamb.
Yeah. I thought he was going to come in here and get sacrificed, and he was not having any of that. And that's a little bit the theme of the night. Although Ortiz was okay, but yeah, I thought, oh wow, when the scores came out, like, do we have another upset on our hands? But regarding back to your question about his future, if he's able to sit in there and hang with Lara and even get a draw off of him, and one of those being a favorable card toward him, that the sky's the limit, I feel, because he's young and he has room to grow, and Lara's a hard out. Like, that's a tough style. He's a savvy veteran. So get him in there against somebody who's not as tough defensively, and he might shine. So I'm looking forward to see Castaño in there hopefully soon versus somebody else.
I believe I saw Sam Watson in his corner after the fight, meaning, like, that means he'd be a full-fledged PBC guy at this point, meaning we should see him again. He retained the belt with the decision since it was a draw. He came in as the WBA regular titleist at 154. So that's still some version of a bargaining chip, I guess. I mean, right now Charlo has, no title. I love the 154s, and, it's just another great guy. I mean, a lot of people were saying, what about a Munguia fight? I mean, I think that would be all action. I mean, I think it would be very hard to make because of the politics, but... Charlo, Tony Harrison now has that belt from the Charlo fight. It looks like they're going to do a rematch. Jarrett Hurd is fighting J-Rock. I mean, any combination of those fights. I'd like to see him fight the winner or the loser of either of those fights.
Of any of those.
Yeah. So, I mean, Austin Trout's still there, as you said. It's like he almost did this in reverse order. Like, this was trial by fire. You know, he showed that he can hang, and, you know, maybe now he will get some of these easier fights, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, pretty exciting. I think the one thing I would say, though, I was struck by how relatively small both of them are in person. I mean, they're basically both... Lara is basically the same height and reach as Errol Spence. And Errol Spence is considered to be a big welterweight, but 154 has these giants. I mean, Hurd, Munguia, Charlo as well is very big frame. Lara looks so small compared to Hurd when he fought Hurd.
Yeah.
And Castaño is even, I think, maybe 2 inches shorter than Lara.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. He might have problems just with the pure height and reach. But, I mean, in terms of, you know, his size, I mean, he seemed thick enough, I guess, and strong enough. But, you know, we'll have to see. Any other thoughts on the main event?
No, just interested to see. I can't wait to get on. Were there any reactions that you've seen on Reddit? I know you're scoring and whatnot, but I want to get on and see what Twitter and what everybody else
I mean,
has
the quick
scored
take I saw was most people seem to have it like I had it, which was like, I mean, the most popular scorecard I saw was 115, 113 Lara.
Okay.
There was a lot of agreements on different rounds. Like, I think a lot of people had the last 2 rounds for Castaño, which I did. Dan Raphael had it for Castaño by 2 rounds. Wow. Which I don't think is surprising. I mean, as I was doing the round-by-round scoring, I'm always trying to keep an awareness of how this could be scored. You know, here's how I scored it, but how could it be scored? And I felt like so many of the rounds were close rounds that could have gone either way. Because, again, it was like, you know, Lara would land, when he would land a left from the outside, everyone in the arena could see it. But Castaño was landing some, again, very clean work on the inside, which, you know, maybe from a little further out, or if you aren't watching the fight closely. Yeah, well, exactly. That's the whole classic thing they talk about with, you know, the judges are all on, you know, they're each on a different side of the ring. It's, and, you know, a different angle than the television cameras. It's like some of that stuff could look like mauling work, but, like, when you actually saw the angle, I mean, he just turned over just these straight, crisp, short inside shots. I mean, it was really... you know, fantastic, and I think, you know, you really had to be right there to see it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on the main event?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Again, or I sort of touched on it, but I don't know.
That's important to note because like from my angle, generally I'm taking shots from a specific angle. If they turn to a certain corner, which it was strange that Lara did so much circling and staying on the ropes. He almost just let him come in. And while he did a little bit of showboating at some point where, you know, he would shell up, put up, you know, a high guard hunch. You know, some stuff was going off of his elbows, some off of his shoulders, but some of that stuff was getting through. And to your point that if you're at a bad angle, I couldn't see it because, you know, they were turned over, but in certain instances they were right facing.
Yeah,
you know,
and
where
I did not mean that as a pointed comment.
Oh no! I'm like
just speaking more generally.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about it now, and it's a very poignant thing to think about. Is that you can't really see it, and then the reaction of the crowd, which was great. You know, another thing, a great crowd tonight. It was a little bit. They were loud. That's what I'll say. Like while we didn't have the numbers weren't you know way up there as I think the announced
attendance was 7,300. Which feels about right. Like the average card here does about 12,000, so it was definitely a small crowd for the Barclays Center, but still a good crowd. You know, I mean,
it was loud.
Theater at Madison Square Garden's like 5,500, so you know it's bigger than any of those shows. And you know, I find in general at the Barclays Center, the smaller shows have like a more hardcore, like dedicated boxing audience, because like that's the thing. It's like when you have the bigger cards, you get more of a crossover audience. When you have like a Danny Garcia card, but then it's like people who are kind of booing for no reason, and like I feel like the smaller cards, it's just the pure people of boxing. I guess that might sound snobbish, but yeah, it was a fun crowd.
Yeah. No,
Tyson, ready to move on to Luis Ortiz? So thoughts on the Luis Ortiz fight? How did you think he looked? Do you think his standing went up, went down?
I think his standing stayed the same. I can understand that some people might say it went down just due to the fact that he didn't get the knockout, which again is narratives and storylines. We have somebody else that's trying to jump back up into that title contention. I feel like he boxed very well. I feel like Hammer at times didn't want to engage. You know, whenever he got hurt or, you know, he's breathing through his mouth, he's getting a little bit tired, he would just kind of circle and kind of stay away. So, you know, Ortiz, you know, he's a boxer. He's not just going to come up and maul you and whatnot. So he did what he needed to do. He won by a wide margin. He looked very comfortable in there. He had Hammer bloody early, although he actually took some damage himself. But I don't
in
ever
that
really
second round, that crazy second round.
Yeah, a wild round that one was. I feel that I don't ever really feel well outside of the second round. I still didn't get a sense that he was in trouble. You know, he just boxed well, landed a lot of clean shots, and just looked okay. So I feel like this is not necessarily just not a tune-up fight, but just a maintenance fight. You know, keep him busy. I would want to see him possibly, you know, mix it up maybe with some of those UK heavyweights, or you know, kind of get a little bit closer toward the AJ Wilder Fury microcosm of heavyweight. But yeah, I don't think this raises his stock per se, but I don't think it kills it.
Yeah, I think. I don't think the performance they wanted. You know, Christian Hammer has not been knocked out in 4 years. In that time, he lost a decision to Alexander Povetkin. So he was knocked out by Tyson Fury actually in a fight where Tyson Fury tested positive for a banned substance. Oh, okay. Which is an odd thing, and again got knocked out. But that's more of an anomaly for both fighters. Generally, he's been pretty durable. So. I don't know. I sort of a mixed result. I mean, Luis Ortiz, I don't know if that was visible to you there, but he had a bloodied nose for a lot of the fight. So just kind of the optics of that weren't great, that he wasn't knocking him out and he had a bloody nose. But at the same time, he dominated the fight. I mean, he landed tons of power shots. He arguably suffered a knockdown in the second when his gloves seemed to touch. I mean, that seemed to be a botched call from the ref. But overall, he really dominated the fight, and Hammer was in pure survival mode. You know, he celebrated at the end of the fight, not because he thought he won, but because mission accomplished, he went the distance, which, you know. So it's a thing, like, Luis Ortiz, I feel like, is always a guy who'd prefer to be the counterpuncher, but just because he's, you know, trying to have... he's self-aware about his career. He knows he needs to be aggressive in order to be marketable. So, you know, it is what it is. The guy who preferred to counterpunch was forced to come forward. He dominated the fight. I had him winning every single round. Maybe you could give Hammer one round if you wanted. But, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, which one? You know, it's like he did well enough where you think, oh, he won 10% of the fight, not 0% of the fight. But which round, though, you know? So, I feel like it was sort of kind of a push. As far as to comment on what you're saying about his future after this, you know, like, it's looking like with Tyson Fury to ESPN, Fury rematch off with Wilder. Dominic Breazeale was going to fight Dillian Whyte, which was a fight I really like, because I thought the winner of that fight, great, that's a perfect eliminator for Wilder. You know, Breazeale's been chasing that fight for years. Whyte has wanted that fight for years. Let them fight each other. The winner of that, fine. I'll finally, like, that's good for me. Luis Ortiz, you know, he's on the PBC side of the street, so you'd have to think, like, Wilder is his likely opponent. It seems unlikely Fury would fight him or that there would be much demand on his own. So I don't really know where he goes from here. I mean, he's so dangerous. I don't think they would put Dillian Whyte or Breazeale in with him because he could very likely beat them, and then that kind of removes one of those other fights. So it's interesting. I mean, he's been so active. Like, you know, he's fought a bunch of these smaller fights recently. Be curious to see what happens. I mean, Joe Joyce has been calling him out. So I don't know.
Smoke, dude. He's not Stavern. Don't do it, bro.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, though. I mean, I don't think you could really put him back in with Wilder right now. I mean, Wilder does have a knockout win over him. He hasn't looked that great in these comeback fights. You know, he knocked out Travis Kaufman, but in the 12th round. He hurt Hammer multiple times, but didn't stop him. So it's like, you know, it's like I'm reminded of when Pacquiao was chasing the Mayweather rematch. You know, he kept having these fights, and he kept, like, not getting knockouts. And it kept seeming like, well, if you could stop Jesse Vargas, then, okay, maybe it makes sense to do the Mayweather rematch. You know, it's like he kept kind of blowing those chances. Like, that's the thing, when the bar is you have to knock someone out, it's like, once you reach the world level, guys are good enough at surviving. So I don't really know what his road back is. I mean, you know, there are
He
other
doesn't have time either. That's
yeah,
the thing.
he's so old.
Yeah, he
yeah.
doesn't have time to sit around and wait. If he was 10 years younger, I would say, just take another maybe maintenance fight like this. Let some other things shake out over the summer, fall, and then you'll be back in it in the spring versus a big name. But he doesn't have that kind of time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the PBC seems to have a plan for him. You know, like he had a reasonable amount of fans tonight. He's very He's always popular with the Barclays Center crowd. Yeah. I mean, it feels like they could do an Adam Kanaki fight. Like that would do business at the Barclays Center. But it's like the problem with all of these fights is like Luis Ortiz would probably win them, and it still probably wouldn't be enough to set up a Deontay Wilder fight. You know, it feels like. I don't know, but again, it's like he's active enough. Like when the PBC doesn't really have something going for a guy, they'll usually sit out. You know, like Lamont Peterson was out for a long time before he fought Spence. He hasn't been back in the ring since he fought Spence. You know, he's got a fight with Lipinets coming up, and it's like, okay, that fight kind of makes sense. It's like they're keeping Ortiz active enough. It seems like it's for a reason, but I don't know. I mean, does he take Gerald Washington? Does he take Artur Spilka, one of these guys that, like, the other guys have knocked out? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like eventually it will be a Wilder rematch, but unless one of these guys wants to step up, you know, it's like Joe Joyce has called him out. I mean, I would definitely favor Ortiz in that fight, but it's like, it's like we saw Castaño fighting Lara tonight. You know, Lara is a great fighter, and Castaño was really made a bet on himself, you know. A lot of people would not take that fight at this point in his career, but he's like, you know, I'm fighting in Argentina. I want to fight these other big fights at 154. I'll go in on that Lara fight, you know? And I think it might take for someone else to do that fight with Ortiz for him to get another. You know, it's like someone else will need to step up to him, I think. But we'll see. Any other fights, any other thoughts on the event? I am not really that interested in going over the featherweight fight unless you are, but any of the prelims, or if you do want to talk about the featherweight fight?
Yeah, well, just slightly, just because it was an upset. It was crazy. I had DeGracia up, again, by a couple rounds, and I felt he was trying to put his foot on the gas to impress, and he was getting, you know, pushed definitely more in the promotion and whatnot, and it just goes to show it was a crazy stoppage. And I want to get your opinion. Like, do you feel it was too early? I don't feel it was too early, but I
don't. And it was kind of from press row. There was kind of one of those things where it was like, was that too soon? Because he was ahead in the fight.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think universally people had it scored that way, but I don't think so. I mean, for the whole fight. I feel bad because I really didn't preview this fight enough, but it was kind of, you know, it's like it was an upset. It was kind of a mild upset. Like they had similar records. This was a replacement fight. You know, this was, but it felt like he had been landing the harder shots throughout the fight, even if he wasn't winning the rounds. Yeah. So that really was in the back of my mind. Like both of them had very, very poor defense. They were both landing flush shots. And just from ringside, you know, you can tell, like, it's a featherweight fight. So on one hand, you think by default it's not going to be a knockout because, you know, generally it's not a knockout division. I know that's a broad generalization, but I think you can follow me. Yeah. And but he seemed to be landing heavy enough shots. It seemed like that was a possibility for sure to me. So I will say I was not super surprised. And especially when they showed the replay over and over again, I mean, it just like, yeah, he was very hurt. I mean, I'm reminded of, it was like in this building also when Danny Jacobs stopped Peter Quillen. It was like very sudden. It was a quick first round knockout, but it's like, especially when you kept seeing the replay of just like how hurt Quillen was and like his eyes weren't focused. It's like, you got to stop that fight. It's like, that's the only move the ref has in that situation. Yeah. Any more thoughts in general? Any thoughts on the prelim guys?
Prelims were good as well. The Bomba, Edwin Rodriguez, he slugged it out, you know, with Williams. It was a cruiserweight fight.
I don't know where he goes from here. I mean,
about it, but definitely not title level, but it was a nice, fun fight. The guys, they had fun in there, going back and forth. Definitely like that one. The Russell's Antonio flavor, not Antoine.
Antonio Russell. We have to keep it straight.
Yeah, have to keep them straight. That was a good fight. He got the stop. I was glad it lasted more than 1 or 2 rounds, like most of their fights do. So that was a a solid win for him. Waiting for them to kind of, I don't know, like their plan to step up or what the end game is for, with all the other brothers coming up. I'm not sure which one is the more favored one. I forget.
So, to be clear, we're talking about their two prospect Gary Russell brothers. Gary Russell Jr. I was going to say Gary Russell Sr., but the oldest brother, who is Gary Russell Jr., is the featherweight champion. Gary Antonio Russell is the bantamweight we saw tonight. Who is actually the older brother. He's 28.
Oh.
So older than I thought.
Yeah.
And Gary Antoine Russell is the 140-pounder, 135, 140. Kind of fights between there. I don't think he's decided where he's going to make a run between those two divisions. He's like only 24. So he's the most favored. But they both look like future world champions to me. Gary, out of all the PBC prospects we see on these cards, Gary Antonio Russell, who we saw tonight, is probably the closest to a world title, the world title level. Like, he's fought a few real opponents. Chris Colbert actually maybe more, he might be a little bit further ahead. But and he looks good. I mean, tonight he smothered his work a little bit.
Yes.
But, the physical talent is there. I mean, the speed and power. He scored a knockdown. His opponent was holding him, and he got a knockdown out of that situation. I have never seen a fighter hit harder when he was being held. I mean, usually it's sort of a general rule of scoring. You kind of throw out, if someone's holding and there's hitting going on, you kind of throw those punches out because there's not enough room to generate power. He was, I mean, you could hear the thwack, thwack, thwack. I mean, I don't know if it was evident from up there, but I mean, it was the speed and power those shots were coming in. It was like, I mean, it was a crazy thing is his opponent kept holding him. Like, he wasn't the one holding and hitting.
He wasn't initiating the clinch.
And he was hitting, so the ref doesn't break that up. And he was damaging his opponent, literally scored a knockdown at one point from that. So, very
I had the same thought. I was like, he needs to stop clinching because Russell's still working, and they're letting it go on because he's still working. So it was actually doing more damage than what a normal clinch would save you from.
So other stuff, Ledwin Barthélemy, I'm not super high on him. I mean, he was in with a low-level guy. Still didn't look that great. I mean, he dominated the fight, but again, it was with such a low-level guy. It's hard to read anything in that. Richardson Hitchens, that was I think right before you got here, but looked really good. Again, hasn't stepped up his level of opposition at all, but he is. I've already seen development. This was just about the 2-year anniversary of when he turned pro. He's 21 now, and I've definitely seen development. Early on, there were some fights that were going the distance that looked like he should have gotten the stoppage, and he's putting his punches. He's putting his punches together better now. And again, it's like talking about the Gary Russell brothers. Like, he has the speed and power where it's like it feels like not only could he win a title, he could be a star. And he's so young, he really has time to develop. He's been on so many of these Barclays Center cards in the last 2 years. Definitely looking forward to his development. So any final thoughts in the evening?
Let's see. So are we saying Teofimo versus Antoine Russell? That's what we're calling for?
I guess that would be it as far as the future showdown. I mean, that's the funny thing. Like, I'm always sort of like trying to pump the brakes on Teofimo a little bit. Like, he's a great prospect. He's out of any of the 21-year-old prospects, he's almost certainly the best one. I get a little frustrated when people are saying he's the next Mayweather. I feel like that's completely ridiculous from the level of competition he's been in with. Oh, are you?
No, I didn't hear that people were saying that, but I agree with you.
I just hear people going nuts for him. But but very good prospect. But some of these other guys I don't think are that far behind. I mean, Gary, but it's like Teofimo, he's been in with a higher level of competition. He deservedly deserves to be considered on a higher level because, they have pushed him harder. He's gotten a lot of exposure on TV. But, it's good. I mean, this was on Show Extreme. Gary Antonio Russell, I think, has fought on some of these Fox prelims televised. So these guys, you're going to start to see more of them. They're right at the level where you're going to start to see them on televised undercards. FS1 shows some of the FS2 prelims. I mean, the PBC has so many dates. These guys are right at that level now, I think.
Okay.
Good.
That's all I have. All the Southpaws, I thought they all were going to win because we have Ramirez with the upset, and then, of course, Ortiz won. his, and I'm like, what if Castaño pulls it off? It'd be Southpaw night, but I don't know. Great night of fights.
Yeah.
Nice little fun card.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, this was definitely not a super high-level card compared to some of the Barclays Center ones we had. I mean, this was like, we were talking about this also, like a lot of these fights looked like in other years would have been like undercard fights on Showtime, or, you know, it just speaks to how many dates the PBC had. They're spread slightly thin, but, you know, just as a fight fan, I mean, I enjoyed the main event so much. I mean, it was just I was really, like, it flew by. I mean, it was one of those fights, sometimes fights can drag.
Yeah.
That was one where every round I just, like, couldn't wait to see what direction the fight was going to go in.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, no, great fight. I think we were last here together. Laura Gausha was one that comes to mind. That one drug a little bit.
Okay.
You know,
I was going to say, that wasn't the last time we were here, but that was an
last Laura fight
Yeah.
where you know he can get it just gets repetitive. He's doing what he's supposed to do, and there you go, monotonous. But this one, props to Castaño. Like, he pushed the action, and Laura stepped up too, and slugged it out with him. They were trading taunts back and forth. Fun fight.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, see you guys next time.
Okay. Out. Sunday Puncher podcast.